Chelsea take on Villa. Villa have no wins in 7, and the Villa fans were turning on Unai Emery. People were asking for his head. Our producer, who's an Arsenal fan, an ex-Arsenal fan, he's actually an Arsenal fan. He thinks this is Emery syndrome. What is going on at Aston Villa?
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on. We're not doing this, are we?
I mean,
that video that went round of Twitter saying sacked in the morning from Villa fans, please tell me that was not from yesterday. It cannot be, man. They have been so good this season. Yeah, okay, they haven't won in the last 7, but they're a million times better than anyone thought Aston Villa would be. You're allowed to have a little blip. Of course, this is the first time for, I think, every single player there who's playing in the Champions League. So playing Champions League and Premier League, which is the most tough and competitive league, of course there was bound to be a slip. I mean, they're still only, I think, 3 points behind City. Let's not get into this Unai Emery out nonsense, please.
That's just absolutely ridiculous. Villa fans, I do remember them getting on pundits' backs when they were like, oh, you might have a season like Newcastle, it might be a bit of a struggle. So, no, we played in Europe last season anyway. It's like, oh, it's a bit different playing Champions League football. And again, they're still within touching distance of the top 4, and they're going to be in the top 4 race this season. And if they are singing Saturday morning, which, I'm with you, I hope they're not, it's absolutely ridiculous. Emery's done a fantastic job since going in there. And think about where they were under Steven Gerrard to where they are right now. If you'd ask any Villa fan at the beginning of the season, you're going to play against Bayern Munich and Juventus, and you're going to be unbeaten in those games and get 4 points, they couldn't believe it. They wouldn't be able to believe that. And I just think it's a bit premature to be criticising the manager that has brought that respect back to Aston Villa. They're a historically huge club, and they're competing against the biggest clubs in this country week in, week out. I know the recent run of form has been poor. The game against Palace was very concerning, how open they were in midfield and how easily Palace were breaking on them. Ismail Assar and Mateta, if they could finish their dinner, that game could have been anything. But they did get a decent draw against Juventus last time out. So let's just hold our horses. Unai Emery's done a fantastic job, and let's all remember that.
Football's so interesting because it was only about 2 weeks ago they beat Bayern Munich.
Yeah.
And people were saying, this is Aston Villa, like this is heritage. And now people are going, inexperienced side in the Champions League, too many competitions. Emery can't do it in 2 competitions. Emery's got to go. They've got to bring in a manager who can do it in both competitions. In reality, there isn't many of those managers out there. And I think they may be victims of their own success from last season.
That's kind of what I was going to say. I think I haven't watched a huge amount of Villa over the last couple of weeks, but I have watched them over the season, and I wonder if maybe they're a little bit reliant on the fact that they are such fantastic players. You know, last year they really had a point to prove. So every single game, especially against teams like your Spurses, your Arsenals, your Man Cities, they had a point to prove, like, we are back, here we are. We can prove that we can mix it with the best. And I wonder if this season, maybe in the league, they've taken their foot off a little bit because they are now at that level. Maybe there's like a little bit less motivation to prove that that's where they belong. I don't know, because all the players are really, really good, and the results really, I mean, they shouldn't have lost 4-1 to Spurs. The Palace game, as you say, really concerning. They could have lost that like 4-0 at half-time, let's be completely honest. So I wonder if there's just like a little bit of something mentally going on.
Maybe they've gone from like the underdog team.
Yeah.
I did feel like against Palace, actually, it felt like they thought, and we're only speculating, but it felt like they thought they were going to win without trying.
Yeah.
And Palace kind of on the day said, no, like we're actually going to have a go and we're going to try and break you down. And they did break them down a few times.
I would say as well, it's tough, right? Because there's only been a few instances in recent Premier League history where a team from the outside of the traditional Big Six have broken into the top 4. You think about Everton in the 04-05 season, obviously Leicester when they won the league. Think about Newcastle, think about Villa. The following season, all those teams have struggled.
Yeah.
And so it is difficult because you're riding that high, you finish in the top 4, which almost feels like a trophy these days. And then the following season, there's a bit of a come down, and we saw it with Newcastle last season. Obviously, we saw it with Leicester back in the day when they won the league, and Everton as well. The following season is always tough for those teams. So let's just see how they go, but they're still within touching distance.
For me, though, just the quick thing I'll say is the difference with Villa, I think, than the Evertons and the Newcastles is I feel like this is where Villa do just belong. I feel like the crowd that they've got, the players that they've got, and the manager that they've got, I feel like they shouldn't not have confidence to be in those positions. They just need to start playing the free-flowing football that they were playing before. Of course, it's going to be difficult because, as you say, you're playing in the Champions League, which is the hardest competition in the world, and the Premier League, and you're playing 2 or 3 games a week, which they're not used to. But they should be there, and they should have the mentality that they should be there, and they should go every single game and go out like they mean to win the game.
This is probably quite an interesting one because Chelsea Villa, for me, I don't know if you feel the same as a Chelsea fan, but it reminds me of like historic Premier League games. Juan Pablo Angel scoring like mad headers from nearly the edge of the box. Villa have a task here to make it a win, first win in 8. Chelsea have a task here to sort of keep this. I'm not sure what I think of Chelsea. I think you're good, but are you good? And like Cole Palmer has 1 goal in 6 games, and people are still talking about him as one of the best attacking midfielders in the league. But on the flip side, you've got Nicolas Jackson, who's got 7 goals from a 6.64 XG, conversion rate of 25%. He's really good, and no one's talking about him. That's probably an indictment of where Chelsea are as a club.
Yeah. Don't want to get too ahead of myself with Chelsea because I've seen title winning sides, right? And this is not it. There are still frailties within this team. Look at the way we finished the Leicester game, a game that we were fully in control of. All of a sudden, they give away a silly penalty. Leicester scoring for the last 2 minutes, we're biting our nails. Like, good teams don't do that. Look at the way that Arsenal dispatched of Nottingham Forest. Just get the job done and no stresses about it. So Chelsea are going in the right direction. We're ahead of schedule under Maresca. I think before the season started, me included, I thought we could finish anywhere between 14th and 4th. We are currently 3rd in the Premier League, and I think that we will finish in the top 4. And there's a possibility, depending on how results go this weekend, if City lose against Liverpool and Chelsea better Arsenal's results, Chelsea finish the weekend 2nd in the Premier League.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Like, welcome the pressure, right? Welcome being there, because these players are really young. We've got the youngest squad in the Premier League by 2 years. This is a very inexperienced group of players that are really playing high-level football for the first time in their careers. We haven't got world-class talents at our disposal like a Liverpool, like a City, like an Arsenal. I think the only 2 players that are touching that level, I'd say Cole Palmer and maybe Caicedo, but I wouldn't say Caicedo is world-class.
Nicolas Jackson, no.
World-class.
Well, it depends. Like, how many world-class number 9s is there?
He's not world class, but he's
cool.
he's performing at a really good level, and he deserves a lot more credit than he's getting, right? Because the worst thing you can do in modern football as a fan is have agendas, because agendas cloud the truth. And if you have this preconditioned idea that Nicolas Jackson was one way because you had a notion about him last season, change your mind based on new information. The new information is that Nicolas Jackson's hold-up play has improved. His finishing has improved. He is performing at a level comparable to that of an Alexander Isak, comparable to that of a Kai Havertz, but there's still that thing with Nicolas Jackson that he's a bit of a joke. He's a butt of the jokes. But this season he's performed really well for Chelsea. The goal against Leicester was brilliant, and I think that given time, given opportunities to be Chelsea's leading man, he will score us goals. Last season, he scored 14 Premier League goals. None of them were penalties. Only Ollie Watkins and Erling Haaland have scored more non-penalty goals than Nicolas Jackson since the beginning of last season. And we talk about Watkins and Haaland being the best strikers in the league. So let's give them some credit. But Chelsea, I said it last week, Chelsea are those baby horses, right? Need to be nurtured, need to be watered, like Jose Mourinho said. Next season's a season, but this year we're going in the right direction.
Well, it's funny because we obviously did that video last week where I said Chelsea are in the title race, and I do still firmly believe that if they beat Villa and City lose to Liverpool, which I think both results are quite probable, they will be 2nd in the table behind Liverpool. And I think the Maresca thing is a little bit comparable with the Arne Slot thing this season. I think there's not that much expectation. With Slot, it was he hasn't bought enough players. Can he do it? With Maresca, it was Chelsea have way too many players. How can he create a cohesive squad out of that? But they both have no pressure whatsoever. There's no expectation for them to win anything. There's a sort of want and a like for them to be in the top 4 at the beginning of the season. But again, I don't think either would be getting the sack if they didn't get there. And I think that lack of pressure, we are really seeing how important that actually is. I mean, we saw what happened to Pep Guardiola midweek with the scratches on his head. Obviously not dealing with the pressure very well
What
at the
was
moment.
that about?
Obviously he's not dealing with the pressure whatsoever, but Bald Maresca's head is completely shiny and in exactly the same colour it's supposed to be. So I do think that the lack of pressure for Maresca and for Chelsea is helping massively. I do think they are in the title race, and I think if they can keep on mixing it against teams like Villa and win comfortably, there's no reason to suggest that they aren't. I know, obviously, they're a young team and they need nurturing, they need watering. But I do think that they will be there or thereabouts because they are playing such good football.
Also on that point, I know you're going to counter Chelsea being in the title race potentially, but I do think we've said this time and time again. We could all be proven wrong, but this is a weird season.
Yeah.
And Liverpool were not meant to be in a title race. Chelsea are not meant to be in a title race. I think the team that's going to win it, if it's not Arsenal, this is Arsenal's season. If it's not Arsenal, it's going to be a team we don't expect to win it. So Chelsea, in that sense, could be in not a title race like we're thinking the last 5 years. The title race is the years before that where anyone could have won it.
Well, in the history of Premier League football, how many non-world class keepers have won the title? I'm probably thinking, Tim Flowers for Blackburn, 94, 95. Probably think Jens Lehmann was a good but not world-class keeper.
Edison.
Edison. Don't do Edison.
Edison. Six Premier League.
You probably think Kasper Schmeichel, but like to win the Premier League, you need a Van der Sar, you need a Peter Cech, you need Schmeichel, you need the best keepers in the world. You need an Alisson.
You go get Kelleher in the January transfer window.
I don't think he's one of the best keepers in the world, though. I think that you need a proper shot stopper.
I don't think it's required anymore. I think football's changed too much. You just need to outscore the opposition, and you've probably got the second best attack in the league. If anything happens to any one of Liverpool's front three, particularly Salah, you've got the best attack in the league.
Got one of the worst defences out of the top teams in the league. Yeah. Give away goals for fun. And that's our issue. It's an immature defence. And I think those top teams have an alpha centre-back. Talked about it all the time. Chelsea are trying to find that. Is it Colwill? Is it Fofana? I think they're great complementary pieces, but there's no Van Dijk there. There's no Saliba there. And you see that inexperience play out in games. And like I said, in the Leicester game, there was no reason for that to be uncomfortable. But it was because we could.
But they're learning. And you might...
Baby horses.
You might learn very quickly because of the way the season is. You might... Like Villa have not won a game in 7. So you could win this game 2-0. And suddenly you're like, well, we beat one of the good sides. Then you play whoever the game after and whoever the game after. And you could just kind of like wobble your way there and figure it out as you go along. You never know. I'm not saying you're in the title race, but I'm saying there is a chance you could be.
I know we've got to wrap it up, but really quickly, I want to talk about the midfield Chelsea. Enzo Fernandez, a man much derided this season by myself as well. In his last few games for club and country, he's really showed up. Against Leicester, goal and assist. And Lavia, when he came off the bench, gave away the penalty. It's so funny how in football narratives change. And when you ask most Chelsea fans, who do you want to start in midfield against Villa, they're saying Enzo and Caicedo. So it'll be interesting to see if Maresca does revert back to Lavia and Caicedo, who give you a bit more protection against a team that is dangerous in Aston Villa, or if he sticks with Enzo Fernandez, his vice-captain, the man who's in form at the moment. I think that'll be a really interesting area of the pitch to watch against Villa.
All right, score predictions.
3-2 to Chelsea.
2-1 Chelsea.
I'm going to go, I was thinking 2-1 as well. I'll go 3-1 Chelsea.